Hello, everyone. I'm Catherine, and with me in my group, we have Guile, Anthony, and Christopher, and we will be presenting our topic that pertains to natural disasters and complex humanitarian emergencies. Throughout our presentation, we will be going over the key terms, characteristics of natural disasters and of complex emergency, the health burden of natural disasters, the health effects of natural disasters, addressing health effects, the coordination of international emergency responses, and lastly, the future challenges. To begin with, we will cover a few key terms that are crucial to the understanding of this chapter. According to our textbook, a disaster is any occurrence that causes damage, ecological destruction, loss of human lives, the deterioration of health and health services on a scale sufficient to warrant an extraordinary response from the outside affected community area. Some disasters are natural, including the results of floods, volcanoes, and earthquakes. Some, however, are caused by humans, such as the cloud of poisonous gas that rained over the town of Bhopal, India in 1984 as a result of an industrial accident. An example I would also like to mention, in 2010, a magnitude of 7.0 earthquake hit Haiti, killing over 200,000 people and leaving approximately 1 million homeless. This damage to infrastructure was extensive and shut down roads, electric grids, and hospitals. Complex humanitarian emergency was established to respond to the larger number of civil conflicts that have taken place. A complex emergency can be defined as a complex multi-party interstate conflict resulting in humanitarian disaster, which might constitute multidimensional risks or threats to regional and international security. CHEs have also been described as situations affecting large civilian populations, which usually involve a combination of factors, including war or civil strife, food shortages, and population displacement, resulting in significant excess mortality. There is an example found in our textbook that mentions Yemen and the clashes between rebel groups and government forces, which have resulted in over 2 million internally displaced people. Under international law, a refugee is a person who is outside his or her country of nationality or habitual residence. They are a subgroup of the border category of displaced persons forced to leave his or her locality of residence in order to flee from or avoid the effects of war, natural disaster, persecution, or violations of human rights. Asylum seekers are people claiming protection outside of their home country whose request for sanctuary has yet to be processed. For example, in Turkey, there are almost 4 million asylum seekers who come from Afghanistan, Iraq, and Iran and Syria. Internally displaced people are those who are forced to flee his or her home, often due to persecution, war, natural disaster, or violence, but who remain within his or her country. As mentioned in the textbook, Colombia has over 7 million IDPs and Syria with over 6 million IDPs. Crude mortality rate is the proportion of people who die from a population at risk over a specified period of time. Attack rate is the cumulative incidence of infection in a group observed over a period of time during an epidemic. Case fatality rate is the proportion of cases of a specified condition that are fatal within a specified period of time. And this next slide, we will cover a few characteristics of natural disasters. Natural disasters can be related to weather, such as droughts, hurricanes, typhoons, cyclones, and heavy rains. There are also those of earthquakes, tsunamis, and volcanoes. Despite the exceptional nature of tsunamis and the deaths associated with them, earthquakes are the natural disasters that generally kill the most people. When looking at who are affected, it was noticed that low and middle income countries are often hit the most, With the rising occurrences of natural disasters comes along the increasing number of people affected, causing more economic losses. The poor are most vulnerable to these losses because they live in places at risk of experiencing such disasters or live in homes that cannot withstand great impact. Natural disasters can cause significant harm to infrastructure that is needed for safe water and sanitation, and roads that may be needed to transport people requiring healthcare. Natural disasters can also damage the health infrastructure itself, such as hospitals, health centers, and health clinics. They can happen anywhere at any time worldwide, but countries most often hit by natural disasters are China, Indonesia, the United States, and the Philippines.
Some characteristics of complex health emergencies. They're usually caused by war and other similar conflicts like genocide. And in 2018, the number of refugees in the world reached up to 65 million people, and the impact of complex health emergencies over the last decade has been considerably greater than that of natural disasters. So some factors that make complex health emergencies so devastating. Number one is that they last a really long time. Many conflicts last many, many years, like the wars in the Middle East. Combatants often target civilian areas, and they even target humanitarian efforts that try to protect the civilians. Many combatants violate human rights. They use torture, rape, and they even attack hospitals. A big example of this is World War II and what's happening during the Holocaust. During complex health emergencies, there are many food shortages and water and sanitation systems may be destroyed. Some long-lasting effects of complex health emergencies are landmines, for examples. And complex health emergencies displace many people, which end up spreading diseases to the countries that they flee to. The health burden of natural disasters. Each year, about 250 million people are affected by climate-related factors alone. In 2015, natural disasters caused a total of 22,000 deaths, and 110 million people were affected globally. There are direct and indirect health effects. Some direct effects will be like instant deaths and long-term injuries, and some indirect health effects will include infrastructure damage and diseases. Some direct effects of earthquake will be people die instantly. A lot of people will be injured from earthquakes and will have long-lasting chronic illnesses from it. Some indirect effects is that infrastructure may be damaged and may not be repaired for many years. For tsunamis, many people die very quickly and not many survive, so there aren't many long-term injuries. And for storms and flooding, the main cause of death is actually drowning, and very few people die from the wind. But one of the biggest causes of death is illness, because diarrheal diseases and respiratory illnesses spread very fast in water.
So some health effects of natural disasters include many things. Just to start off, about 320,000 to 420,000 people are killed each year. However, there are a number of problems that arise within natural disasters. So when pipelines break and the electricity poles fall, there's problems such as like unsanitized water. With natural disasters also comes malnutrition, because there's a cutoff in the food supply for a long time. There's also a breakdown in health services, since there's a huge influx of people needing care and treatment. Child mortality rates are also higher than adults in complex humanitarian emergencies. And in refugee camps, there are potential possibilities for disease outbreaks, as Chris mentioned previously. Many people, in fact, died in the refugee camps during the Rwandan genocide due to a spread of cholera. And populations that are affected by natural disasters the most are generally poor and not well nourished. a lot of people in refugee camps lack vitamin A, and they have also seen a prevalence in scurvy, which is a lack of vitamin C. With the natural disasters also comes a lot of emotional and mental trauma. So some people experience a lot of psychological shock, like PTSD, due to sudden changes in their life. There was a prevalence of PTSD among Burmese refugees and Cambodian refugees in Thailand. That includes children as well. Next slide. And so to address some of the health effects of complex humanitarian emergencies, it begins in phases from start to finish. So it starts with the immediate event of the disaster, and then it continues after the people settle down and after the disaster subsides. A relief effort is put into place in the beginning. So this includes a release of field hospitals, which is where the government sends out people and they set up camp to treat the injured and take care of the deceased bodies. We can also predict where places are at risk before the actual health emergency. So some states are prepared, like in Texas, for like major storms like hurricanes and twisters. California, of course, our big emergency is the earthquake. They create disaster preparedness plans. Public health efforts are also put into place to monitor diseases, since there is a possibility for outbreaks. They also provide food, water, and shelter. Field hospitals are very expensive, so when they release it, they don't arrive until after the incident has taken place. I believe in the book it mentioned it was 3 to 5 days. And the government also provides cash and building materials in order to help the community rebuild. Countries also send goods to the affected area, but there are some times where the goods that the country does send to the area is not what the people needs. So it just depends on the communication that they have. Search and rescue teams are used, but not as often as one would think, since it is not that cost effective and it is very expensive. And the likelihood of finding a lot of survivors in one go is very slim to none. Relief workers, however, are also sent out to the field to help the injured.
All right. So as far as as far as coordination of international emergency responses, the Office for Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs is the United Nations body that's responsible for strengthening the coordination of the United Nations responses to humanitarian emergencies. OCHA executes these mandates through an interagency committee. Some of the members include the Food and Agriculture Organization, International Office of Migration, United Nations Development Program, and the World Health Organization, among others. Reforms created to improve the coordination of responses to complex emergencies, which was created in 2005. These include improved humanitarian leadership through the appointment of a humanitarian coordinator for each emergency, enhanced coordination of humanitarian action through the cluster approach, which involves a bunch of organizations working together, the promotion of faster, more predictable, and equitable funding through improved humanitarian financing, the creation of more effective partnerships among all humanitarian sectors through the principles of partnership implemented in 2007, the standards and guiding principles for humanitarian action. These include a people-centered humanitarian approach, coordination and collaboration, assessment, design and response, performance transparency and learning, and aid worker performance, and humanitarian response protection principles. These include avoiding exposing people to further harm, ensuring people's access to impartial assistance, protect people from physical and psychological harm arising from violence, and assisting people to claim their rights, access available remedies, and recover from effects of abuse.
And
then
here,
future challenges involve preventing humanitarian emergencies and natural disasters from having such negative health impacts, focus on cost-effective approaches to provision of healthcare services in emergencies, and focus on immediate needs.
And here we just have our reflection questions.